Egyptian mediators have begun supervising talks between Israel and Hamas over border issues left unresolved by the ceasefire. This as Egypt now faces internal turmoil over President Morsi's constitutional decrees, what many are calling a power grab. NBC's Martin Fletcher is in Tel Aviv and Ayman Mohadeen is in Cairo. Welcome both. Let's start with you, Ayman, in Cairo. I know it's a little calmer today, but you're expecting more protests tomorrow. It was suggested by Dennis Ross earlier, who has seen a lot of these negotiations in the past, that Morsi probably overreached and now has to find a face-saving way out all around it. Do you see any signs of that?
Well, absolutely. You know, after he fired the country's top generals a few months ago, he's now set his sights on the judiciary, and that's because him and his supporters, mostly the Islamists and ultra-conservatives, say that it was the judiciary, the senior judges of this country who were appointed by President Mubarak, the former dictator, that are blocking Egypt's transition to democracy. They upheld the law that essentially dissolved parliament. They are also blocking other measures that President Morsi wants to drive forward on his agenda. So what he and his supporters are saying is that they needed to have this judicial immunity, this decree that he issued on Thursday that allows him to make laws without the supervision or the review of the Justice Department, essentially so he could pass these types of legislations that move Egypt to more stability and to a more democratic transition. That right now seems to be the biggest protest. People here in Egypt are not buying it. They don't trust the promise of a president who they say after 30 years of dictatorship will deliver on absolute power going back to the hands of an elected parliament once that happens. Andrea?
And Martin Fletcher in Tel Aviv. This must be causing some stress in Tel Aviv with Israeli officials, because they're counting on Egypt to monitor any future smuggling of rockets, for instance, into Gaza. They are the guarantors of this ceasefire. So far, it's holding.
Well, that's right. It is holding, and Israel is worried because looking at President Morsi in Egypt, as you say, they are depending on him more and more. Also, by way, of course, the United States. We're all looking at, everyone's looking at the Egyptian leader now to see what kind of a leader he will be. From Israel's point of view, it's can they trust him to actually oversee the truce arrangements with Hamas and not favor Hamas. By the way, it's in a sense it's pretty close to the equation of the Palestinians saying that America is too much on Israel's side when it's overseeing negotiations before. So now it's on the other foot. Israel now concerned that the Egyptian leaders will favor Hamas, and the demands of Hamas that Israel open all the border crossings. There's only one open at the moment. There were four before 2006. Hamas wants them all opened. Israel's insisting they don't smuggle weapons. Now the question is, does Israel trust the Egyptians to make sure that Hamas does not smuggle weapons into Gaza? And looking at what we're all calling a power grab in Egypt, increasing the power of the Islamic fundamentalists in Egypt, it doesn't bode well for Israel's confidence in the Egyptian leadership, Andrea.
And Martin, before I let you go, what is your read on Ehud Barak's statement that he is not going to serve in the cabinet? Some suggestion here by Dennis Ross just moments ago that this is could be partly read as a signal that he doesn't see an imminent military action against Iran, which has been a main part of his agenda.
Well, it has been a very important part of his agenda, and it would be surprising if it really was going to happen soon that he would, at this point, facing one of Israel's most momentous decisions in its history, that he would want to take a back seat. And there are a lot of other things going on. And one of the issues, of course, here is that his own party that he founded almost 2 years ago, the Independent Party, is doing really poorly in the polls, and it's likely that he may not even make it through into the next parliament in the elections that are being held in January. So it's being seen here that maybe he wants to quit while he's ahead, and the fact that he's going to resign as defense minister does not mean, by the way, that he could not be called back to service by the Prime Minister Netanyahu if he wins the elections in the future. So he's saying he's getting out of politics, but doesn't necessarily mean the end of his political career. A lot of skeptics here, Andrea.
Martin Fletcher, that's why we asked you for the reality check. Thank you very much. And I'm joined now, thanks also to Ayman Mohadeen in Cairo. I'm joined now by former National Security Advisor for President George W. Bush, Steve Hadley. Steve, good to see you.
Nice to see you.
A lot going on. Let's talk about Iran. And the testing of Iron Dome, at least against short-range rockets, the promise from President Obama for more money, for more missile defense against the longer-range missile. They already have Patriots there, but obviously some more long-range protection as well. What does Iran's read now, seeing that Morsi and the Islamist Party has been the guarantor of this ceasefire? Does that create more leverage for Egypt and less for Iran as the mentor to Hamas in Gaza?
Well, it does give Egypt some influence with Hamas. They, of course, have the same Muslim Brotherhood roots. On the other hand, this has been an opportunity for Iran, because Iran, in some sense, has been the arming agent of Hamas in the same way that they have been the arming agent of Hezbollah. And it is also viewed by many as a proof that Israel only makes concessions in the face of threats of violence, which is very much out of the Iranian playbook, rather than, for example, the playbook of Fatah or Western countries who would like to see a two-state solution achieved through diplomacy rather than threat of violence.
Do you see the United States and Iran getting involved now in bilateral talks? There's certainly a lot of suggestions from this side, as well as some suggestions from Tehran that perhaps they could be serious. You never know, because they have promised and retreated in the past when the Ayatollah decides that they've gone too far.
Look, we'll have to see what the administration does. I think you had Dennis Ross earlier on the show. He and among others have said that the administration ought to make a real comprehensive offer to the Iranians to resolve the nuclear issue as a test. If it's accepted, then that would resolve the issue, or at least be a down payment towards resolving the issue short of force. If it is rejected, it will have smoked out the Iranians as to their intentions. The question, of course, is there a deal that we could accept, that the Iranians could accept? I tend to be skeptical.
What if there's a deal regarding a real oversight of a civilian program that could not easily leap to the, in terms of the number of centrifuges, the amount of enrichment, so that they could have their claim that they have the right under the nuclear treaty to a civilian program, and we had enough oversight from the International Atomic Energy Agency and others to know that it was not easily transformed into a weapons program?
Well, that, of course, is, if there is a proposal, that's what it will get down to, because there is a view among many people that if some enrichment is not allowed, there is no deal that Iran could accept. There are many Americans who believe that there is no kind of oversight of an ongoing enrichment program that doesn't allow Iran to move closer towards a nuclear weapon. So that will be the debate within the United States. And the question really is, does the proposal that comes out of that debate, one that the Iranians could accept? If not, then the question is, where are we? And many people would say we've set the table for use of force if we need to do it, if the Iranians continue, as they have been, moving along towards developing their nuclear program. And the challenge, of course, for any military option is it needs you to leave you in a position where you're more able to prevent Iran getting a nuclear weapon, not less able to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. And that is a tall order. We need a more, I think, a more informed and insightful debate about what is a scenario involving diplomacy, sanctions, negotiations, and perhaps limited use of force that's actually going to move us to a better place, more able to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, which is what President Obama has said we must do, than the alternatives. I don't think we've had the kind of sophisticated debate in this country we need on this issue.
Very interesting. You're concerned that we could envision use of force which would leave us in a worse place and closer to a breakout.
Correct.
Steve Hadley, thank you. Thank you so much.
Nice to be with you.